Hi, it's me, Daphne, and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be talking about my top books of 2024. So I've already posted a video of my top romances that I can link in the corner for you if you want to check it out. I read a lot of romance and I wanted to give those books its own moment. I've also posted my top smutty novellas for 2024. You can check that out as well. I'll link it in the corner or down in the description. So if you need some smutty recs, I have that already on deck. Today's video is just your standard book across multiple genres outside of those two. In my number 5 spot, I have a book that I read for my IRL book club here in New York City, and that is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. This is another book in a part of a larger series. This is the first one. I just thought the writing was so captivating. There's so much talk with our main character, Louis. He was a human man, kind of like in the time of slavery. He was like a landowner in Louisiana, and he becomes this powerful vampire, but he is just so agonized over having to be a killer. What is the morality? Like, where does he draw the line with humanity? And like all his agonizing thoughts, I ate them up and I thought it was really well done. It's also the type of book, because it's just fiction and not a romance, I have no idea where the story's gonna go, you know? So we went through a roller coaster ride of ebbs and flows of, you know, climaxes within certain aspects of his life and the people he was around, and then that would kind of resolve, and then he would meet somebody else, or like another conflict would come and it would crest and it would peak, and you know, it was always waving like this. So I found the story very entertaining and I would definitely recommend it. Actually, after I read this book and was talking about it online for the first couple times, I got a lot of comments hyping up this series. People were like on book 7. They said, you know, obviously some books are better than others, but it made me excited to potentially continue on with this series. Though I anticipate the vibe changing a lot, because the second book talks about a character that Louis interacts with in this book, but it's maybe in the 80s, and instead of like an old-timey character like Louis was, this guy, this vampire who happens to be older than Louis, decides to become like a rock star during the 80s. And I guess it's that story. I don't really know, but it just seems so different and like less dark academia vibes. Like this gives, there's no academia, but it gives like dark academia vibes, in my personal opinion. Not that I've read that much dark academia, but it's like dark and moody and like sitting by the fire with candles and like just being sad and like, you know, contemplating life, like that energy. I don't imagine that translating super well with a rock star, but intrigued still. Loved this and would definitely recommend it to you. So the next book in my number 4 spot is The Long Way Down. I listened to this via audiobook and I would highly recommend listening to it. This is a fairly short story about a 15-year-old Black kid named Will. He lives in an apartment complex and he's home. He lives on maybe like the 8th floor. He lives on whatever number floor there are chapters in this book, right? Because at the start of this story, he finds out that his older brother Sean has been killed in gang violence. So he's trying to get his revenge. I think he grabs a gun or something and he goes to the elevator to take it down, obviously to leave and like do whatever he feels is necessary. And each chapter is him getting lower and lower into the building. Like, oh, he reached floor 7 and it stops and somebody comes on, 6, somebody comes on. And it was just so beautiful. I was crying. He sees some people from his past. The story is also written in a poetic fashion, in my opinion, so that's why I really enjoyed listening to it. I just felt the way the narrator portrayed the emotions was so beautiful, and I think it was an interesting portrayal of the circle of violence and sadness and heartbreak and the breaking up of families. And yeah, my mom recommended this to me. I don't know how it came across her, but I'm glad she recommended it to me, and now I can recommend it to you. The next book I have in slot number 3, and I wouldn't necessarily say that the top 2 books are like better than this book. I've rated all of these books that I'm going to mention 5 stars, I'm pretty sure. And this list is obviously arbitrary to my whims of when I put this list together. But this book, this third book, is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a nonfiction book about a young woman who was assaulted on a college campus. This is another book that I listened to. Chanel Miller narrates this book herself, and there are points in her telling of her story where you can hear her get upset and emotional. It just adds another layer to connect to her as a human being and not just another name, another statistic, another sad story. Like, she is a person. I think her book went a little further than I expected as well, because she gives a lot of background and perspective outside of just the events that took her to trial against this college student who assaulted her. And it also talked about like her expectations with the legal system and how she didn't realize how like demeaning and difficult it would be for her as the victim. Like, she thought it would just be a straightforward, easy case. Like, he touched me when he shouldn't. That's it. But no, they like tried to challenge her memories, tried to challenge her desires, tried to say she wanted it. Like, I think it's a book that if you can stomach the subject matter, obviously sexual assault is horrible and triggering and sad and tragic, but if you can read it when you're ready to emotionally take on that toll, I think everybody should. Woman, man, non-binary, transgender, like everyone I feel like could gain a lot from reading this book. And I'm glad I finally picked it up this past year. It's been on my TBR for many years, but I just wasn't ready. And I'm glad I was able to take that in. The book that I have in slot number 2 is the uncensored version of The Picture of Dorian Gray. I read this for my IRL book club as well. I had so much fun annotating it. Even the like general introduction was really interesting, getting the background on Oscar Wilde and how many iterations of this story came out. It's very queer, and obviously at the time of this first print, like, that was not okay. So things were redacted and changed, so it was really interesting to read the uncensored original version of his work. And I think also because this is the second time I read this book, I read it for the first time when I was in high school, when I was young. I was probably like 16. And then I read it for the second time as a 29-year-old woman, and feeling that no, not even more than that. God, how many years difference? Like 13 years difference is so pivotal. It was like such a pivotal change for me as a person. Like, I am not the same girl that I was when I was 16. I'm still me at my core, but like, I've experienced different things. I interpret life and like longevity and death and like the concept of youth and beauty and the fear of aging and dying and, you know, not being the most prestigious, not prestigious, but like not being the youngest generation anymore and not being like the preferred generation in our own eyes anymore. You know, I feel like when you're young, you're like, oh, we're the best. Like, everybody else is just old and they don't get it and da-da-da-da, right? So just that like chance to shift perspectives as an older person was fascinating. I would love to keep rereading this in every decade of my life. How cool would that be? That would be so cool. And then like, especially like, I plan to have a family and stuff, so like reading this again as I have children aging up and like I just think it could be so interesting. If you don't already know, this book is about our character Dorian Gray, and he's gorgeous, he's beautiful, he's youthful, he's naive, and one of the painters, I think his name was Pascal, is pretty much in love with him, and he uses Dorian as his muse, so he paints his portrait. Pascal has a friend who's quite cynical, and he basically tells Dorian, like, youth is all that matters, like, just do whatever you want as long as you're beautiful, like, da-da-da, and he kind of corrupts Dorian. And through this corruption, this like magical realism moment happens where the painting of Dorian is changing and aging and showing the evil deeds that Dorian has committed. But Dorian, the physical person, remains beautiful and innocent looking and perfect. And it's just so interesting. I think there are such amazing quotes in this book. I mean, obviously I highlighted so many things. Oh, like this line right here, it says, "I hope the girl is good, Harry. I don't want to see Dorian tied to some vile creature." And the other guy says, "Oh, she is more than good. She is beautiful." Like, being good doesn't matter. All that matters is being beautiful. You know what, too? I've been obsessed with Wicked lately, and just that particular line that I randomly picked out reminds me of Dancing Through Life, because he's like, life is fraughtless for the thoughtless. Like, you don't need to be smart or good, you just need to be beautiful. Like, it doesn't matter. And, you know, for some people that's kind of true. Like, pretty privilege is a real thing. But at the same time, like, that's horrible. It's like, don't live like that. Like, that's terrible. You should be a good person. So, absolutely love this. If you read it, I would recommend the uncensored version. It was interesting because some of the other book club members read the finalized version of this. So there was like this version, then there was the redacted version, and then there was his edited version, which was longer. So they were talking about scenes with like a brother and then like him traveling out to the country, and like none of those scenes happened in my version that I read with Trevor. They read that version as well, and we were like, what are you talking about? And I think the conciseness of this one for us worked better than like kind of the superfluous stuff that was in their version. So, loved this book so much. I will definitely continue to reread it throughout my life. That leaves my favorite book of 2024, which I pretty much called out immediately after I finished reading it. And that is Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. This is a sci-fi feminist story about a humanoid robot named Annie. She is the girlfriend of our human man, Doug, and she started out as just like, you know, someone to be there to help him with the chores, but obviously he quickly turns her into a sex robot. The interesting about Annie, though, is that she's autodidactic, which means she has the ability to learn. So just like think of AI learning, whatever, on her own. And she's more advanced than the other robots that are out in the world. So just seeing her learn about what it means to be human, but also seeing the microaggressions and like just straight up aggression against her from Doug, because he doesn't treat her like a human, because at the end of the day she isn't, but it just like reflects on society and how some men don't even treat human women better than Doug treated Annie. And oh my God, I think this book is a familiar premise, but just the way it's executed so subtly, but like with such a powerful emotional like reaction, was beautifully done. I had to binge this book as fast as I could within like 36 hours because I was agonizing over Annie's situations. And it's not epic in the sense of like, think of like a Steven Spielberg movie with like explosions and all that stuff. It's just so soft and quietly agonizing and painful and just well executed. I know some people hated this because they're like, it's a sex robot, like this is this weird author's kink. That I'm like, guys, this is not about sex and kink. Like, yes, she's a sex robot. There are going to be descriptions of her being used by Doug, but it just adds to this sense of her being literally used and not respected, you know? So I feel bad for those people. I feel like they missed the point. This is a beautiful piece of art. Absolutely loved it. I recommend it left and right. I want to recommend it to more people, but I'm a little hesitant because, again, like some people might be sensitive to a sex robot story. But if you can get over the judgment of that, I think you could really take a lot out of this story as a feminist. So, my favorite book of 2024. I hope you get a chance to read it. I hope I'm not overhyping it for you too much. Honestly, I think the best way to go into a book is with low expectations. I didn't really expect too much out of this book, and it pleasantly surprised me. So read it because I'm asking you to, but like, just kind of be like, yeah, I'm just curious, you know, and then maybe you'll love it as much too. If you think it's going to be like the best thing ever in the entire world, like that's a lot to live up to, you know, it's still a book at the end of the day. All right, so those are all my favorite books from 2024 that aren't romances and aren't smutty books. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave it a thumbs up and subscribe down below if you haven't already. I would greatly appreciate it, and obviously it helps out my channel. And I will catch you in another video. Bye!